Hey, welcome everybody to Pro Mindset Podcast. This is your host, Craig Domann. I've got a gentleman today. It's part one of two podcasts. He and his brother. This is Chris DelBorrello. He is by way of South Jersey. He unfortunately is a Philadelphia Eagles fan. So he's glowing in the Super Bowl victory from last January. They've only won at the taping of today. They've only won 20 out of 21 games, 20 of the last 21. So the Eagles are struggling right now. I'm Chris. Welcome to Pro Mindset.
Hey, thank you, Craig. Thanks for having me. I appreciate that. But what you didn't say was I went through a lot of heartache as a child at growing up an Eagles fan in South Jersey. So I think we're due, especially the beginning of the Andy Reid era. We went some close calls, but no cigars. So as they say, but now we're flying high.
I am sure you've got a Donovan McNabb football card in your office framed as like your favorite Philadelphia Eagle.
Yeah, I have Donovan McNabb. A couple others are my favorites. I love Hugh Douglas. I love, just the TO experiment started off great. The middle was great, didn't end very well. But those are some of my later childhood memories. I love that whole team. It was just great. Brian Westbrook, and went to Villanova, so right in Philly. So he was a Philly guy in college. And he was a very shifty runner. He knew how to make people miss. And so, yeah, he was one of my favorites as well.
Yeah. And B-Doc was one of the best players on defense.
Yep. Goes without saying. B-Doc. I think that's one of those ones. If Joe Banner had to do it all over again, he would have remained an Eagle, the GM at the time. But it was a great era. It brought Eagles football back from the lowest of lows. And then we kind of springboarded into the Twins and, did very well over the last, 7-8 years, winning 2 Super Bowls out of 3. So we're doing good.
I think you guys are doing great. I am very happy that Joe Banner let Brian Dawkins get away and go to the Broncos because he actually coached one of my boys in 7-on-7. And so got Brian and his son Junior. So really good dude. Okay. So why are you on Pro Mindset? What is your story? Share with our audience, like the centerpiece of where this is going to go today.
Yeah. So just with, what you do and what you coach and consult and speak on kind of really ties into our story. And so just for starters, a little bit about myself. I'm a father of 4. So I got kids that range from 16 down to 6. So I'm in the thick of it. We're driving to cross country practice. We're driving to basketball and volleyball and deck hockey and dance competition. I'm a dance dad. So I'm in the thick of it with being a father and a husband. I'm also the chief compliance officer for our family businesses. And we do things like real estate, both commercial and residential, alternative financial services, and a couple other things. And I'm also a high school business education teacher now. I've been doing that for 2 years. I'm finding that very interesting, and the students are keeping me on my toes, so to speak. But that's been great the last couple of years. And I'm also an author and a speaker. I speak on what had happened to our family and our family business. And so to go back a little bit further, I grew up in a normal family household, 2 loving parents. I had 2 older brothers. My oldest brother's name was Tom. My middle brother, his name is Pete. You'll meet him later. I have a little sister. And so there was 4 of us. We really grew up in the all-American family. I mean, when I was younger, it was kind of like the tale of 2 halves. From the time I was born until about 10 to 12 years old. My dad was struggling trying to build his business. He was in a family business with my uncle, Paul, at the time. And they were trying to build a franchise company. And so the beginning years were a little struggle. But after that, his business started taking off. He had over 150 stores, franchise stores across the country. And so he was a founding father out of 4 people of the parent franchise corporation, United Financial Service Group. He also owned his own individual store in the middle of the heart of South Philadelphia. And we kept that store to ourselves, and that was our family business. And so after everything started taking off, like I said, it was a pretty all-American family. I didn't come from a disadvantaged background. I didn't have any problems growing up. We had a pretty decent living and a life, and all of that changed one day. We thought everything was going great, and lo and behold, on May 11th, 2016, he received notice that my oldest brother Tom was stealing and embezzling family funds from the family company, and that kind of just turned our life completely upside down.
What were some of the negative consequences? What were some of the low blows that you guys faced because of your brother's actions?
It's really varied, and it varies depending on the people that I talk to and from our own personal experience, right? So I didn't mention, I used to be a politician too. I know that's a bad word in today's world, but I tried to be one of those politicians that worked for all the people and that brought people together on both sides of the aisle. But being a politician in the public eye, you can't really, when you have family issues, you can't really sweep it under the rug like a family that is not in the public eye, right? So our public reputation took a hit, right? Because, so-called quote unquote political enemies, I don't find them as enemies, but people who do find me as an enemy, they would use that in campaigns. Your reputation, so our reputation took a big hit. Again, being in the public eye. Financially, it completely bankrupted us. I mean, we walked in that day like everything was fine. When we found out that my brother was embezzling the family money, we immediately started going through everything. We started opening up the online banking tools. We started looking for cash in the store. We started trying to figure out if cash was in transit, and it was just all gone. There was no money in transit. There was no money in the store. There was no money in the bank accounts. We were actually negative almost, $200,000. Owed people money that we didn't even know had creditors that we didn't know we had. We were a family business for 50 years. We shouldn't have had any creditors. And it ends up Tommy was borrowing money from business accounts and not paying them back. We didn't know that. There was this whole cascade of series of events, and we started going into crisis mode. So reputational wise, risks, operational risk, financial, bankruptcy, all this, kind of just blew up in a ticking time bomb, and it had negative consequences. And then the other aspect too, I would say that is probably besides, the money and the reputation, the public eye reputation is what it did to the family internally as far as family dynamics go. So marriages fell apart. Therapy became a necessity for both some adults and some children in our family. When something like this happens, sometimes the relationship, depending on, the family member and some of the other family members, relationships get ruined, right? And you have to work your way back, and all kinds of healing and therapy needs to go into that, right? So from having a family breakdown, mental breakdown, to a financial breakdown, to a public eye breakdown, it was a mess.
What was the hardest one?
What was the hardest? The hardest for me, from my perspective, is that my oldest son, Trevor, he was really good friends with his cousin, my brother Tom's oldest son. When he's 16 now, so this would have been 10 years. So when you're 6 years old and your mind is the furthest away from business and money, at that age, you're just looking to have fun, right? And play with friends and family members. And so the hardest thing for me was watching Trevor and his cousins grow up before they had to. In my mind, like, it kind of took a little bit of their innocence away in a way. And they had to grow up a little faster because they couldn't understand what was going on. Why don't we see parts of the family as much as we used to? Why don't we spend all the holidays together? So for me, the hardest part has been, the children had to grow up before they probably should have a little.
I could see that. I could see that as a definite challenge. When you went from somewhere to nowhere, what was the toughest challenge for you day to day? Just as a man, knowing that you had something. It's almost like in football. These guys sometimes don't know in the NFL when they're going to get cut. They don't sometimes see it coming. And they might have been a first rounder. The team had very high expectations. Everybody in the city knew it. Everybody in the stadium knew it. Everybody in the locker room knew it. But the player didn't know it. For
Yeah.
some reason, he didn't know it. And he gets the carpet pulled from under his feet. And they have to start over. They have to rebuild their confidence, their identity, all those things. What was your biggest challenge as a man after, the dust settled and you knew, because You didn't instantly know what you know now. And that's a period of time. But once you realized crying about it isn't going to help, what was the first step and the most important step that you had to take to get your mojo back?
Yeah, that's a good question, right? Because it's very different than a sports player putting the time, the energy, the effort in, the preparation, right? To put for a goal, right? A goal that you're attaining. To any sports athlete, anything worthwhile doing in life, you're usually preparing for that moment and trying to prepare for that moment to succeed in that moment. This was very different. This is us trying to succeed in our worst moment that we had no idea that was coming. And so this is part of what I talked about when I get in front of audience, when I'm doing speeches and speaking to companies, both small and large, family businesses, and even big corporations. This is what I talk about. The first thing we had to do was sit down and own the truth. Okay. It would have been very easy for us to say that it was all Tommy's fault that our money is gone. It was all him. He stole all the money. We're in this mess because of him. And to a certain extent, that is true. But when we sat down and we tried to look at where did we go wrong, what was our participation in the situation, there were some significant, oversights, and we had to own up to that. We had to own the truth, not something. And I know society wants to talk about this thing today where we all have our own truths, and to a certain extent, I understand what they're saying, but most of the time, there's only one objective truth, right? In your heart if it's true or not. If you're lying to yourself, right? And so when we talk to people and we tell them the first thing you have to do is sit down and own the truth, it's a brutal evaluation. You have to look at the situation, have a brutal evaluation with yourself and with the people around you and say, okay, what did we get wrong and how can we go from here and get better? And so I'll just give you one quick example. When we did that, right? The first day, that day, May 11th, 2016, I mean, that was furthest from our minds. But we got up the next day, and when we started evaluating the situation, especially over the next 6 months, until we could get the crisis, abated a little bit, we found out like we were still balancing cash drawers on paper and pencil. And when I say in 2016, there wasn't AI. I know AI is the big topic right now, but there was no AI back then, but there was definitely software. And all financial institutions were on some type of software system balancing drawers. And we were still using paper and pencil. And what Tommy was doing was he was erasing numbers and writing in new numbers. And in our industry, we call that fudging the numbers. And so he was covering up his tracks. And maybe we would have seen it sooner if we had a better system in place to catch theft. Another thing that when we kind of were thinking back over even before this day, the previous year leading up to that, we had multiple team members, kind of highlight to me and my brother Pete that about Tom's, particular nastiness or like irritability. And we just kind of we're like, well, maybe he's having a bad day, or maybe he's didn't get enough sleep last night. He was having kids at the time, so maybe the baby was up all night. And I think that was a failure on our part to not kind of address that situation. And so for instance, for now, we have zero tolerance now in our companies. The first complaint we get about another team member acting towards another team member, or a supervisor acting to somebody that they supervise, we take that very seriously. We've learned from that mistake. We don't have any tolerance for that now. And I just kind of think back on that going into this whole idea of owning the truth, right? Again, it would have been very simple for us to just blame Tommy for everything. But sometimes you have to look in the mirror, and it has to be a brutal mirror, as I call it, not just any mirror, right? Because we get up and we look at mirrors every day, right? And the mirror shows you what you want to see, your reflection. But if we look at a brutal mirror and we have radical honesty with ourselves and we stop hiding and stop making excuses, that mirror can tell us our participation in the situation. And that's the first step. It's really the first step is owning up to your situation.
So it sounds like to me, and I'm sure there's a lot of businesses out there, even in 2025, maybe we're passed down and they've been doing it a certain way for a long time, and they don't have elevated standards. They don't have systems because they needed them. And it's very difficult for a son to go to his dad or daughter go to his mom, whoever the case may be, and say, hey, we need to do it differently. And the answer most of the time is something like, this is the way we've done it for 30 years. We're not going to fix it because it's not broken. So how do you update, modernize, install, when it's not broken?
Yeah, and that's like the very first thing that I talk about in our book, The Company You Keep. It'll be out soon, hoping that comes out by Christmas. But in a book, we talk about in family businesses in particular. Now, we're kind of unique because my dad's part of a corporation, but we also have like our own small family business where we do things. So we kind of see both worlds, right? And we have one foot in the small family business, mom and pop world, and we have one foot in the corporate world. The thing with family business is that there's just an inherent trust that since it's your blood that we could just trust, right? We don't have to verify, our family members will never do anything to us to, cause us to any suspicion. Mom and pop shops, I understand why they do it, but they have to get out of this framework that we're a mom and pop shop, so we don't have to do things by the book. They have to break out of that box that they put themselves in. Well, we're special because we only have 5 employees and 4 of them are family members and whatever the case may be. They have to break out of that way of thinking because here's the problem with that thinking. When nothing happens to you, you could go, 30, 40, 50, 60 years without having any legal issues. It's very rare, but so long as nothing bad happens to you, you can operate your business like that. But the minute something bad happens is when all the mom and pop stuff rears its ugly head, and not having policies and procedures and just having blind faith and trust in your son or your daughter or uncle or whatever, because it might not just be theft. It could be some type of addiction. Maybe an uncle has a gambling addiction. Maybe, an aunt has an alcohol addiction. So it could run the gamut of any type of problem. And so the first thing you got to do is break out of this, you're a mom and pop shop mentality. And the second thing is with mom and pops that what we noticed over, looking at this very intently over the last decade is usually mom and pop shops have one of two types of intelligence, right? We talk about book smarts, right? So the intelligence of being book smart and being educated, right? Some family member might be good at that, and so they do the paperwork in the background. Another family member might have what we call street smarts, right? And so they're on the front end of the mom and pop business. They're shaking hands. They're watching. They're very street savvy. They kind of they went through the college of hard knocks throughout their life. So they're operating under those two assumptions, and that's the only two intelligence you need. There's a third intelligence, and the research has been very good over the last 40 or 50 years about this type of intelligence, emotional intelligence. And that's the piece really that family businesses lack, right? They don't even know about emotional intelligence. They've never studied it. They've never heard of it. Corporations now are getting, I would say have been getting on the emotional intelligence bandwagon for the last 20 or 30 years as this research has come out, but mom and pop shops haven't. And so our book is about not only having street smarts, not only having book smarts, but also having emotional intelligence. Family business have to develop their emotional intelligence skills in order to work well with their family members, in order to not fight, right? Because a lot of family businesses fight. And what you brought up in your beginning question there about generational rifts, right? So from grandfather to father to grandson, or, to aunt to, niece, that generational rift is real. And the thing that emotional intelligence will help you understand is both viewpoints are valid. There's still stuff that, me and Pete learned from my father, and he's in his 70s now, that he's 100% right. And I'll say to my brother Pete, I was like, Dad was 100% right when he said that. And then on the flip side of that is my dad, I think I put in the book that we were talking about we needed to do more advertising, and he brought up newspapers. And I'm like, Dad, nobody is advertising in newspapers anymore. So maybe we need to do a little SEO. And he's like, what's SEO? As a search engine optim. And so it was just that generational gap there, right? But he still has information from his vast experience over the last 50, 60 years. And we have some new experiences with technology and AI and how to run things. And being aware of that, being emotionally aware of that will help solve that issue dramatically. dramatically.
Dive in a little bit more to emotional intelligence as it pertains to the business world. Because emotional intelligence generally is known as somebody that sees it from a different person's perspective. Emotional intelligence is when you didn't bury your head in the sand. You actually can see above the circumstances. You can see yourself. You're outside of you're almost having an experience outside of your own mind and body because you're seeing the whole situation, the big picture, not just your perspective. How does emotional intelligence, how would you define it? Because that's a very broad term. How would you divide it in terms of intelligence in business when you were looking at book smarts, street smarts, and EI?
Yeah, I actually do a lesson with my high school students on this, and in my entrepreneurship class. And the way that I frame it for younger populations that have never heard of this, and I think even the older population that has never heard of this, think about it this way. Because a lot of people, and I know a lot of people throw out that term. It's maybe a hot term or a hot button issue to throw out. But really, if you take the time to learn it, it will benefit you and your business. But think about it this way, and if somebody's never heard of it or wants to learn more about it, why does somebody with a high IQ possibly not succeed? You would think that, somebody with a high IQ and very smart, everybody with that type of IQ would succeed, but yet they don't, right? And that's very understandable. And then on the flip side of that, somebody with what we would say, low IQ or didn't score as high on the IQ test than somebody else, they succeed, with bells and whistles, right? So what is the reason for that? And then somebody that never went to school or college or anything, self-educated, and is like what we said, has street smarts, has gone through the hard knocks of life. Why do they succeed and why do some of them don't succeed? You can understand why they wouldn't succeed, but why do some of them do succeed? So there's got to be something else to explain that, right? There's got to be something explaining the reason why somebody with high intelligence might never get anywhere in life, and somebody with low intelligence what we consider low intelligence, might get, the highest of highs, right? So emotional intelligence explains that, right? Kind of what you said. They might not score well on a test, but they are very good at looking at a situation from the 50,000-foot view. They're very good at understanding people. They're very good with interacting with people. And so those types of skills, and a lot of people mistake emotional intelligence for just being nice to people. That's not what emotional intelligence is, although it is nice to be nice to people. But it's that gray area where those two first intelligence can't fill, that's filled in with emotional intelligence, where you can read people's emotions. You can empathize with their emotions. You have control of your own emotions when you need to have control, and you're aware of your own emotions. The more people can do that, the better off they will be. And especially in a family setting, the more they can be in tune with their emotions and the emotions of their family members and their team members and their coworkers, and even in a corporate setting, right? There's all kinds of trainings out there that teach this stuff, that talk about this stuff. Even in a corporate setting, the more you're able to work well with others, read their mannerisms, read their, how many times have you seen, for the workers out there, your coworker just kind of be quiet that day. You see something's bothering them, but you don't really stop and ask. Just as simple, the differentiator between stopping and asking, "Hey, are you okay today? Is there anything I can help you with?" versus the person that just keeps walking not by the cubicle, that's what sets them apart. Having that emotional intelligence sets them apart, and it was why they rise up the ladder.
People skills. You described a little
People
bit of people, right? Some people have it, some people don't.
Mhm.
Some people have a lot of it. Okay.
Yeah.
I want to go back for a second and go back to May 11th, 2016. Let's go back to May 10th, 2016. Describe your business and how you felt about your business, your relationship with your business, your business finances, the hope and the bright future that your business may have had on that day when you left work.
Yeah. So the other part of the story that I didn't tell, I was actually in medical school at the time. I was at Drexel University's a physician assistant program, one of the top 10 physician assistant programs in the country. As I said, I was a former politician, and when I didn't run for reelection around 2014, and I was sitting down with my wife trying to figure out what I wanted to do, I always knew that I wanted to help people no matter what career path I had. And that's partly why I got into politics, because I wanted to be a different type of politician. I wanted to be a politician that actually solves problems, that helps people. And so after I did that for 4 years, I said, you know what, I want to try and find a different career path and that has an impact on people. I always was having that thought in the back of my mind. And so when I sat down and talked with my wife and we started going over some things, and I said, one of my friends was a physician assistant at the time. And, he loves his work. He loves helping the sick. He loves, that. So that's what I ended up doing. And I did the prerequisite classes. I went back to school to get the anatomy and the physiology and all that good stuff that you need to get into medical school. And I actually got into Drexel's school. At that time, May 10th, the day before we found out, I was on break from Drexel. They do trimesters. So I was on break at that time. And whenever like I was in college or I just needed some extra money, I would work at the family business at our store in South Philadelphia. But I was never like in it. It was just I would just go back and work. If they needed some help here and there on a weekend or whatever, I would always pitch in. But it was never. I was the first person in my family to go to college. So I was supposed to go to college and go off and do something else so we could start branching out. So I'm on break from Drexel Medical School on May 10th. And we went to work that day and we left work that day the same as every other day, going back to my father and my grandfather for the past 40 years. So there was no sign of, anything was wrong. There was no sign that, we're in a financial institution, so we're highly regulated by state, local, and Fed. So we were following all our policies and procedures as far as BSA, a Bank Secrecy Act, and AML, anti-money laundering laws. We were following all the procedures. Having independent reviews come in once a year and look at our financials and compliance and all that. There was nothing to forewarn us that the next day, May 11th, our whole lives would change. So we got up, we went to work, we left, we went home, we went to bed. The next day we got up, we went to work, and about an hour into work, I got a call from my brother Pete. And he asked me, he said, "Where are you?" So we had gone to work, and actually Tom had asked me that morning, it was about 10 o'clock in the morning, and he said, "Hey, I want to go run some errands. You want to come in?" Yeah, I said, "Sure." So we get in the car, his car, he's driving. We're running errands. I think he was picking up some medicine for his kid. We went to Staples to get some supplies for the business. Normal, average day, beautiful day. Sky was blue. My brother Pete calls me and he says, "Where are you? And where's Tommy?" And I said, "I'm in the car. Tommy's right next to me." He's like, "I just got a call and Tommy is stealing." And like, it's one of those things where you get that news and the whole world stops. You feel like it really is like a movie. Like the slow motion starts happen. The voices start to get muffled. Like your whole body goes numb. Like the guy right next to me, my oldest brother, you know, is stealing money. That news really impacted us. And I said, "Well, I'm here with him." And he said, "Take him back to the store and just keep him there. I'll be there in an hour." And so I hang up the phone with Pete, and Tommy, who's kind of hears the conversation, and he says, "Who was that? What was that?" I said, "It was Pete." And he said, "Well, what was he saying?" And he was asking about me. I said, "Yeah, well, he was just we're in a financial institution. So there's always the risk of, theft, robbery, or anything like that." I said, "Oh, he was just worried about us because, some safety issue or whatever." I said, Don't worry, everything's fine." Obviously I knew now, but just to kind of not tip him off, we go back to our store, and about an hour later, Peter shows up, and, we go up to the conference room, just the three of us, three brothers. And that was the last time that us three brothers would ever be in a room together by ourselves. That was the last time and the last day. And we went through a 45-minute interrogation. Where's the money? Why would you do this? And then it's kind of like when somebody gets caught, like they just kind of shut down, right? So he knew he was caught. He gave answers that didn't make sense. Tried to, move. He was, it was pretty intense. It's something that I never hope that I go through again. And I hope that other people don't go through that. And that's part of the reason why I'm doing what I'm doing now. Speaking to family businesses, speaking to corporations about this issue, having better emotional intelligence, putting better policies and procedures in place. Also, if this type of situation has happened to you, and again, it might not be theft, it might not be embezzlement, it could be something totally different, some type of addiction. Where do you go from this? How do you go from your lowest of lows, climb out of that, and go to your highest of highs? And that's what I talk about, how helping people how to do that. And we've come up with over the last decade a 3-step process, and I spoke to it earlier. Own the truth, work that truth, and then have nonstop ownership. And if you want the outcomes, and I think our biggest thought during that first day was, and I knew it was definitely our biggest thought the next day, we don't want to go out like this, right? Kind of like, you're an NFL agent, your players, you were probably just as devastated as they were when they got injured, right? Especially towards the latter part of their career. Think of Kobe Bryant getting that injury toward the latter part of his career. And what did he say? He said, I'm not going out like this. I'm going out on my own terms. I'm not going to let something else dictate what happens in my life. And I remember having that thought, like an injured, older, football player. Like, some of them just say, I'm just going to retire. I can't rehab. I can't get back to the way I was. But then some of them are like, no, I'm going out. I'm walking off this field when I want to walk off this field, not when an injury happens to me. And I remember having that kind of mentality with this situation. I'm going to go out on my own terms. If I'm going to go out, I'm going to go out swinging, and it's going to be on our own terms, and we're going to earn our outcome. We're not going to let somebody choose our outcome for us. And that's what we did. The next day we started getting back to work.
Okay, so go into a little bit more detail, Chris, on owning your truth. What is truth? What does that mean?
I think deep down inside, we all know what that means, right? And so, again, getting back to this society saying everybody has their own truth, in a way, yes, but there is objective truth. We know right from wrong, right? We know certain things in this world are right and certain things are wrong. And so this idea of owning the truth, it's a hard conversation with yourself. It's an internal conversation. And I would venture to say, for everybody watching or listening now, if you really think about it deep down inside and you're at your rock bottom, you're at your worst moment where you're saying to yourself, it can't get any worse than this. If you think about it, you will find the decisions that you made on your own that led to your rock bottom moment. Okay. I think everybody, if they looked hard enough for the truth, they will find that their decisions led to their outcomes. Their negative decisions led to their outcomes. Now, are there certain circumstances where you had nothing to do with your decision and it left you in a bad place? Yeah. I mean, we don't get to choose where we were born or what family, whether we're born into a wealthy family or a poverty-stricken family, whether we're born into two loving parents or, into the foster care system or whatever. So you don't get a choice in how your story starts, right? None of us do, but we have a choice in the middle and the ending, right? And so if you are a person that is been struggling with some type of trauma from your youth that you had no participation in, maybe you were verbally abused as a child, maybe you were, sexually abused as a child. If you're struggling with trauma like that, yeah, you didn't have a choice. You didn't make decisions that led to that. So in those circumstances, that's not what I'm talking about. You do know that you're struggling with that, right? So at some point it comes incumbent upon you to then seek help for that, right? Maybe it's time. I've been struggling this with 20 years of my life. Maybe it's time for me to see a therapist. And by the way, not just like anything else in life, all therapists are not equal. So if you tried that and went to therapy and you found it didn't help, first of all, how long did you go? Because it doesn't happen overnight with one session or two sessions or not even a 3-month session. It takes years. It takes 1, 2, 3 years maybe of therapy before you and your therapist can figure this out. So don't give up too early. And the second thing is, some therapists are coming right out of college. They don't even have an experience. So if you went to an inexperienced therapist, you might not have the best outcomes. And I talk about this in a book, right? Just like there's bad teachers out there, there's good teachers. Just like there's bad lawyers out there, there's good lawyers, right? So not every therapist is equal. If it didn't work for you, don't give up on that, because that's the only way you're going to get out of traumatic stuff like that. But getting back to my point is, if you look hard enough, you will find 99% of the time that you had something to do with that negative outcome that you're in right now, that lowest of lows. And that's what I'm talking about, owning the truth. And if you look hard enough, you will find that.
That's really an uplifting comment, Chris. That whatever muck you're in, whatever mud you're in, it's 99% your fault. We like to blame everybody else for our failures, right?
Yeah, again, and I tell people this too, because a lot you'll see in society too about grace, and there's a lot of stuff online. You'll see influencers talking about grace, and my kind of counterpoint to that is, yes, you can have grace for yourself and for your situation, but only after you do the hard work. The day that we found out Tommy was stealing, May 11, 2016, if me and my other brother Pete just sat there on our hands and said, well, let's just give ourselves grace because, it was all Tommy, we wouldn't have done anything. We wouldn't have made any decisions. Never, there would have been no onerous to get out of our situation. We would have just felt sorry for ourselves, and because it was all somebody else, and we have to have grace for ourselves because it was all somebody that did it to us. And that would have been a recipe for disaster. Now, since we did have the ownership, since we did own the truth, and since the last 10 years we've been working the truth, and since forever to my dying day, I will never have nonstop ownership for my truth. Now we can have grace for ourselves. That example I give you where, we had a couple complaints about Tom's demeanor. I was very shameful for a long time about that. It affected me. I would say that affected me more than the financial loss, because that was eating me inside, that we didn't put a stop to that when we got 2 or 3 complaints, and so that was very emotionally taxing on me, that I had people come out and say, Tom's, he's a little nasty, and we did nothing. And that was very emotionally taxing on me. And I could have said, well, I didn't know any better. I didn't know he was being like that because he was stealing, so I'm going to have grace on myself. No, I needed to own up to that. I needed to switch my policies and procedures about having a zero tolerance with regard to respecting supervisors and team members, create a new code of ethics. And once I did all of that hard work, owning the truth and working the truth, now I can have grace. All right. Because now I can say, you know what? I wasn't the person I am today. Wasn't May 10th. I wasn't the person I am today, October 2nd, 2025. And so I give myself grace now, after doing the hard work and recognizing. Having grace in the beginning only serves to keep you in the bottom.
Okay, Chris. So you have this family business, your brother embezzles money, you guys go down the tubes, you've got all these lawsuits, you've got all this stuff coming at you, okay, creditors and whatnot. You guys took almost a half a year to try to figure out all the collateral damage that was done. And you've gone to therapy, you've written a book, you've moved on, and now you're coaching and teaching and speaking. Now that it's been relatively 9.5 years ago, if you wrote a paper about you are glad it happened, what would be the reason for why you would say you are glad it happened?
2 things. One, while I'm upset that my kids had to grow up a little bit before their time, that they had to, their innocence in a way was taken away, finding out about this. I'm also thankful for the fact that they know now what making bad decisions in life can lead to, not only for yourself, but everybody around you, right? That's the part that's missing when people choose to make bad decisions. They think they're only hurting themselves. But as we started off with, you ruined the whole family's reputation, our name in public. You left us broke financially. You left us broke emotionally and mentally, right? So Tommy's actions weren't just hurting him. He hurt everyone that he's ever loved all around him. And I'm really glad that my kids see that and have learned that lesson. One of the things was that I really can't get into legal issues, but I wanted my son to be there during some of those times. Like I said, he's 16 now, because I wanted him to see what the consequences are of making bad decisions in life, not only for yourself, but for everybody around you. And so I think he's really learned a life lesson. And my other two daughters, they're 13 and 10 now. And so I am thankful for that. And I really think that this has set them on a path to make good decisions in life and do great things. That's number one. Number two, my whole message and going out and talking in public, right? I go back to this, certain cultures, certain types of families, they want to give this persona in public that, oh, we're the perfect family, right? Keeping up with the Joneses, we have all this money, we would never do anything wrong, and we just look so good out in public. And so a lot of cultures don't want to talk about this stuff in the open, and especially family issues, right? But what I've learned over the last decade, when we open up to other people, some strangers that we've never even met, they open up to us. Oh, you think that's bad? Let me tell you what my aunt did to my grandma, right? So the more I open up to people, the more they open up, and it's more than just platitudes, right? Sometimes when we meet people, we just talk about sports or whatever, and it's just a high and by thing. But like, it has led to deeper and more connecting conversations with people that I would have never had beforehand, and it has allowed me to go out and talk about our message and help others. I'm glad this happened to me because I can help prevent this from happening to other people, and I can give them the resources and the tools, which is what the book and the speaking is supposed to be about, helping them get the resources and the tools to get and earn any outcome that they want, right? Whether you're at rock bottom and you're trying to get out, whether you're trying to become more mentally or physically fit, whether your outcome you desire is trying to become financially stable for the first time in your life, stop living paycheck to paycheck, right? Whatever your outcome is in life, and our outcome was we didn't want to go down having something else happen to us from our brother. We didn't want to go out like that, and we wanted to earn our own outcome. And that's what we teach people to do, how to earn your outcome in your most difficult situations. And so I'm thankful that I do that, and I'm going to continue to do that for the rest of my life. And that's what it's all about, right? What kind of legacy are we going to leave behind after we pass on, right? And so I'm hoping I will be glad if I leave impact people and help them out of their most difficult times.
I want to ask you one more question it's about you.
Okay.
You did a great job of sharing all the silver linings about your kids growing up, the fact that you can help other people, that you can leave a legacy and you can help others. How has it hurt you? How has it changed you? And maybe how has it helped you just from going through it yourself? What have you learned about yourself?
That's a good question. Think going along with the last question about I'm glad that this happened to me because how has it changed me personally? I have become so much more carefree than I ever was before, May 10th and earlier of 2016. Before that time, before this whole situation, I was more of I got to keep studying. I was always good at school. I got to be a doctor, a physician assistant. I got to keep proving myself to other people, especially my parents. And I think a lot of people like have that mentality. I don't know why that is, but certain people just have that mentality. I got to keep proving myself, keep proving myself. And what this situation is led to is a certain carefreeness, I'll call it, that has changed me for the better. When I'm interacting with my students in high school, I don't care if I look corny. I don't care if I I'm doing all their lingo. These 15-year-olds have their own language now, 6, 7, and all these social media memes and stuff. So I try to mimic that and play and have fun. And I don't really care if they laugh or in public, people are going to use the situation however they want to use the situation. So in an election, they're going to, hammer us on TV commercials and send mailers out about us, about how bad our family is. And I don't care. I used to care when I ran my first election in 2009, when they sent out bad mailers about me. Oh my God, did you see what they sent? This and that. It hurt. It took a lot out of me. Politics is not for the faint of heart. But when they attack me now on it, I don't pay any attention. I could care less. I know I'm comfortable in my own skin. I'm comfortable with everything that I've been through. There's a lot worse I've been through than a negative mailer from in politics. And so there's been a sense of freedom, maybe is a better word, a sense of freedom that you may have a lot of money one day and it might all be gone tomorrow, which literally happened to us. So I learned a lesson that, money isn't everything, which some people know early in life, but some people don't realize until their 60s and 70s when their health starts to deteriorate. Right. So I'm thankful that I learned that lesson in my 30s than, in my 60s or 70s. Relationships are more important than money. You could have money, it could go away tomorrow. And there's a certain freedom with knowing that and learning that early in your life, mid 30s, that has given me a freedom that I don't think I had before, like to really do what I want and pursue my goals and dreams the way I want to pursue them. Whereas before this, if everything had kept going smoothly, the family business was fine, it was good financially and it was healthy, I might have gotten into the trap that a lot of people do, right? Going to work 9 to 5 until you're 65, maybe not being as happy in life with that work. So I've completely changed my mindset since this situation has happened, and it's given me so much more freedom. And that's how it's changed me for the better. For the worse, I'm not going to lie, there's still financial situations that we are taking care of to this day because of what happened. I mean, again, it's almost a decade later and we're still dealing with this fallout. And so everything hasn't been cleared up yet. I'm hoping one day soon it is. And so now we can completely put it behind us. But I think it's changed me for the better way, way more than for the worse.
I didn't know you before, and I can tell you from listening that you have more freedom now. You have freedom from the optics, what it's supposed to look like, what people say about you, how much money you make, how big a house you live in, your status, your career. Probably needed to show your kids that you were successful. And now you're not probably worried about that. Before you might have been based upon what you just shared. So
That was a big one too, Craig. That you're absolutely right about that last one with the kids. Before this situation, like I said, I was a politician. I was in medical school. I was always doing something, and that was the time that I was starting to have kids. My son was born in 2009, so and 2012 I had a daughter, in 2014, but before 2016 I had 3 kids, and I wasn't really as focused on them. Again, giving myself grace at this point in time, looking backwards, I didn't really spend enough time with them. I was always trying to help others, and it's got to start at home first, right? Before you can help others, you have to take care of your family and make sure they're okay. Then you can go out and make an impact on the world. But uh, if I still have work to do in my office, but my kid's playing deck hockey tonight at 5 o'clock, I'm leaving. The work can wait till tomorrow. And in all honesty, I don't know if I was like that, 10 years ago, but now I am, most certainly, absolutely. And so that freedom and knowing that with my kids is more important than work, I've learned over the last decade.
Chris, thank you so much for being on Pro Mindset today. If there's an organization out there that would like to have you speak, where can they find you?
They can find us at delborrello.com. I know it's a hard last name. It's a good Irish name, DelBorrello, DelBorrello.com, delborrello.com. You can find us there. Like I said, our book will be out hopefully by Christmas, and we will have a new website coming soon, earnyourOutcome.com. So it's not up and running yet, but earnyourOutcome.com will be our new website, and you can find us there hopefully a very short couple months here.
Any final comments?
No, I appreciate your questions. They were good questions. I did enjoy your book, Pro Mindset. So I definitely, want to highlight that for anybody watching or listening today. Some of the things that you talked about, and especially with your performance bubble model, I've tried to unknowingly, enact some of those things. Sometimes you're doing things and you don't know you're doing things, but I highly recommend your book. It was a great book and a great read. So everybody check that out.
Chris, thank you so much for being on. Thank you for the plug. Go to earnyouриncome.com when it comes up, and have an awesome day today. Go Eagles.
Go Birds.
Or go Chiefs.
Now
Go
Birds.
Chiefs. It's Craig Domann, the host of Pro Mindset Podcast. I want to thank you for listening or watching today's show. And you can catch us every week on the normal social media platforms like YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and all the listening podcast platforms. I hope you enjoyed today's show, and more importantly, I hope you gained a pro mindset insight. Please be sure to rate and review Pro Mindset Podcast, and I look forward to catching up with you on our next show.